So what is going on, everyone? This is Fabi here, and today we're here for the review of the iPhone 10. Now, if you would have asked me when Apple announced the iPhone 10 if I would buy it, I would tell you that I wouldn't, because first of all, it's too damn expensive for what it is, and second of all, I was on a 2-year update cycle and I just got the iPhone 7 Plus, so I was definitely not due for an upgrade. But because there was a really good offer for this phone, I got it pretty cheap. I just couldn't resist buying it, so I just bought it, and now about 1.5 months later, I think it's actually 2 months now that I've had it, I can give it a review, a fair review, and a pretty thorough review at that. Now, as with most of my phone reviews, we're going to talk about the design, we're going to talk about what's new in this iPhone, we're going to talk about the display, performance, battery life, and whether or not it's worth it. First of all, let's talk about the design. When it comes to design, you know, there's finally something to talk about, because for the last few generations the iPhone was just about the same, no dramatic cosmetic changes. So now that we got a new design, we can finally talk about it, and it's beautiful, it's really beautiful, but I don't like the fact that it's slippery and it feels like if you're gonna drop it, not only is it gonna cost you a lot of money to replace, especially the screen, it's also going to look pretty bad if you scuff it, because the edges are shiny, and if you scratch them, if they get scuffed, they just won't look beautiful anymore. Also, about the design, you can talk about the fact that the camera is protruding. It doesn't really affect me because I use a case with my phone, and I do recommend you guys use a case because, as I told you, it's pretty slippery and you don't want to be dropping this phone. The cost to replace the screen is pretty astronomical, if you ask me. Also, when it comes to design, we can talk about the size, not only of the screen but of the phone, and I do like the fact that it's, you know, a little bit smaller than the iPhone 7 Plus, but what I don't like is the fact that the screen feels smaller. It's not smaller when it comes to inches, you know, when you measure it, but because of the notch and because of the aspect ratio, it just feels a little bit smaller, especially because it's thinner, and it doesn't necessarily show a lot more on the screen than, let's say, the iPhone 8. Now, I do feel like this year there will be an iPhone 10 or 11 Plus, whatever they will call it, and that might just be worth it more than this, but this is not bad, I'm not complaining. It really fits well in the pocket, and it's more manageable when you're using it with one hand than the Plus versions of the previous iPhones. Let's talk about the new things now. The new things are basically Face ID and the new gestures, at least in my opinion. These are the new polarizing things that some people may like and some people will absolutely dislike because it's different and they can get used to it. But when it comes to Face ID, its fail rate is, for me at least, much lower than that of Touch ID. With Touch ID, if my hands were not 100% clean or if I was wet, it just wouldn't work. Now with Face ID, it basically works 100% of the time, whether I have glasses or not, whether I have my beard on or not, it just works, so that's really awesome. I do like the fact that it requires attention, so if someone's pointing your phone at you and you're not looking, it's not going to unlock. So it's really much more secure and it's really much more convenient. The only problem that I see with Face ID right now is that it doesn't have a wide enough angle to recognize you. So if you have it on your desk, you can't just unlock it if you sit like this. You have to basically get in front of your phone and then it will unlock. But it's just a little annoyance, I think, with the first generation Face ID. It's nothing major. You get used to it, just like you get used to picking up a phone that has a fingerprint sensor on the back side to unlock it. But then again, it will be nice if the next generation Face ID will have a wider angle of recognition. Now let's talk about the new gestures. I honestly don't miss the home button from the previous generation iPhones. The fact that you can now do multiple gestures on the iPhone, and it kind of works like it used to on the iPad, where you can switch from apps, go to the multitasking menu with gestures. It just feels more fluent, faster, and it works better. The only annoying thing for me is that when you want to force close apps from the multitasking menu, you have to hold on the app in order for the little stop button to show up, and then you can close the apps. But that's going to be changed in iOS 12 to the way it was previously on previous iPhones, where you can just flip the apps and they will close, which is definitely a nice thing to hear. Next up, let's talk about the display. I really don't have major complaints here. Apple switched to an OLED screen, and I do feel like they did it at the right time. You know, with previous versions there were all sorts of issues, and I'm not talking about burn-ins and stuff like that, because those were fixed for the most part. I just didn't like the fact that the colors were way too vibrant, and I don't know if that was just Samsung's tuning of the screen or if it's how OLED screens have worked, but I feel like this is the perfect balance of true to life colors and vibrant colors. What I still don't like is the fact that when you have a black background and there's white text or stuff like that, you can see some ghosting because pixels individually turn off when they're black, and then they have to turn on if they're supposed to show any color. So there's a small delay there, and I'm not sure if that's from Apple's implementation of OLED or if it's just OLEDs in general, because I haven't really used OLED displays in the past. It's not really noticeable unless the brightness is really low and it's at night and you're really picky about it, but you can tell it if you're really picky, and it might drive some insane. Although maybe not. It's not really that bad. I'm just a little bit exaggerating. Also, when it comes to display, it's really good on the battery. You can see that I have a dark background because it helps, and it's not just presumption, because the pixels turn off, they don't have to be on, they consume less power, and at the end of the day you just have better battery life. Brightness is really good. iPhones for the last few generations have been really good at this. You can see the display really well in sunlight. It doesn't even crank up to 100% brightness when I'm outside, which on the iPhone 7 it would do because it had to do that in order for me to see the screen. Now with the iPhone 10 it cranks it up to about 75% and I can see it just fine. Next on performance, you know, with the iPhones there's really not much to complain when it comes to performance. While it is true that the last few updates have not been as polished as iOS 6 perhaps, as people really do like to comment about how iOS 6 was so perfect and the last few iOS updates are just glitchy. With iOS 11.4, at least on the iPhone 10, I can tell you that it works perfectly. There's no glitches, there's no delays, there's no frame rate drops, and it really does perform well. It holds apps in the memory really well. If I use an app today, I can open it up tomorrow and it'll be at the same spot where I left it yesterday. So it's really good about that. You can see here some benchmarks. Obviously the iPhone does really well when it comes to Geekbench benchmarks and other sort of benchmarks. I've tested it on the Geekbench CPU and GPU benchmark, and Apple's SoC team really did an A+ job here, so props to them. This is really not something you should be concerned about. Obviously games are going to be running really well. If you want to do some encoding or I don't know, stuff like that with video or doing some stuff that requires CPU performance, this is really not going to be a bottleneck here. Next up, talking about the battery life, I'm really pleased to say that the battery life has met my expectations and even went beyond those, because I came from an iPhone 7 Plus and I wasn't really happy with the battery life on my iPhone 7 Plus, and from the beginning when the iPhone 10 released I thought that the battery life would just be worse than the iPhone Plus versions and worse than the non-Plus versions, because it had a bigger screen, it had the body of about the iPhone non-Plus versions, and so the battery just couldn't really be stellar. And of course the capacity is basically about the same with the Plus, but the screen being bigger and it just having more horsepower than the iPhone 7 Plus, I thought that the battery life would be a disappointment, but at least with my particular model here I can tell you that I'm really happy about the battery life. The standby times have really improved from the iPhone 7 Plus, which are something that I just couldn't understand with the iPhone 7 Plus. It was the worst iPhone for me when it comes to standby battery life. This one does really better. I'm happy to tell you though that the iPhone 10 doesn't have any battery life issues as of now, and it really does last me a whole day, and it's now what, like 10 PM and I still have 42% battery life. And today I was away, I had some stuff to do in town, so it's not like I just stayed at home and did nothing. So I was on 4G LTE while I was away, I wasn't on Wi-Fi the whole day, so that definitely impacts the battery life, but I still have 40% left and the day is pretty much over, so I'm really satisfied. The standby times are really much better than previous iPhones, and of course because it's an OLED screen you will save up battery life if you have a darker background or if you use the dark versions of apps you are using. So stuff like Alien Blue for Reddit and other different apps like Twitter, I think, have dark background options, so those are really going to help you out when it comes to the iPhone 10. Let's talk a little bit about the camera. Coming from the iPhone 7 Plus, I can tell you that the camera is also an improvement, especially the back-facing zoom camera. It now has optical image stabilization, which really does help, because if you think about it, when you're zooming in, all the little shakes that your hand makes are going to be much more visible, so the image stabilization really does help when it comes to that. When it comes to the front-facing camera, they now added the portrait mode, and I'm really not happy with the way it's implemented, at least right now in iOS 11.4. It's really glitchy, and if you have curly hair or even hair like me, it just blurs out some parts of your face, or like the edges of your face where it thinks it's the background but it's still your face and stuff like that. So they still have a little bit of work to do there, but overall the back facing camera is great. The front facing camera is great as long as you're not using the portrait mode, and yeah, the back facing portrait mode is great. The back facing video stabilization and video recording is great, as you can see from the clips I'm showing you right now, and the pictures are also really good, and they've also improved a little bit on the low light situation when it comes to the back facing camera. Last but not least, we are going to talk about whether or not it's worth it. So when it comes to my opinion, if you do have the money and you want a premium phone, a phone that's probably gonna last you a few years, and a phone that looks new, feels new, and has new stuff, you're definitely gonna be happy with the iPhone 10. I know for some people it will be hard to swallow the $1,000 price tag, but if you think about it, this is really something new and something different, something that has started a new, not revolution, because this is more of an evolution, but it just started to shift the smartphone market into a different direction. I know this wasn't the first phone to have a notch, but this is the first phone that had a notch that publicized it more than, I don't know what the first phone was that had a notch, but I certainly wasn't too interested about a notch before the iPhone 10, and now I think it's a really nice way to sort of extend the display to the edges of the phone without sacrificing on things like the earpiece or the front-facing camera. And until we can figure out a way to integrate those into the screen, we're gonna have to deal with a notch for a little while, and I'm not mad. It doesn't bother me, and I think this is overall one of the best phones of 2018. Now, of course, I haven't used all the other phones that have come out in 2018, but the iPhone has always been great at being overall good at every single thing that a phone has to do. I'm not saying it's stellar at everything, but it's pretty damn good at almost everything, if not everything. So anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel for more videos in the future. I know I have some more videos to shoot for you guys, and I'm going to make sure those are going to get posted on my channel in the next few weeks hopefully, but I've been really busy with exams. I finished them now, so hopefully I will find some more time for videos. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to stay tuned. Peace out guys. Peace.